But today we're going to be talking about a person who's been in the news a lot lately, especially last week, and that is the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. So, what do people know about him? I want to give a little biographical sketch. Anybody know anything about him?
He or his brother was at MIT, I think.
Right. So Benjamin Netanyahu is the first Israeli prime minister to be born after the establishment of the state of Israel. Aside from Benjamin Netanyahu, all the other prime ministers were either born abroad or born during the time of the Palestinian Mandate, the British Mandate in Palestine. He was born in 1949, and he grew up in Tel Aviv. His father was a university professor, an academician, and when he was young, the family came to this country in a few different short stints, 2, 3, 4-year stints. His father taught at Penn and at Cornell, most notably, and his teen years he spent outside of Philadelphia in the suburb of Cheltenham. He went to a public high school, Cheltenham High School, and that's why when you hear him speak English, his English is perfect. His English is fine, it's perfect. It's because he grew up, for some of his growing up took place here in the United States. After high school, his family went back to Israel. He was in the army for did his first part in the army, and then he came back here to the States, and he went to school at MIT, studying architecture to begin with. Then after just 2 years at MIT, he returned to Israel to fight in the Six-Day War in 1967. After the war, and in that war he received medals for meritorious conduct. He helped with several different missions. He was part of a very elite military unit called the Sayeret Matkal. And after the war, he came back, finished his degree at MIT, but he switched from architecture to I want to say applied mathematics, something like that. And concurrently, he studied political science at Harvard, and he got his undergraduate degree and went on to get a master's degree, all from MIT. With, in Boston there, they still to this day have the consortium, and if you are at MIT or Harvard or Brandeis or at many of the schools around there, Tufts, you can take classes all in their different schools. So he studied political science at Harvard. When he graduated, he got a job in Boston with the Boston Consulting Group, and which was a kind of a political think tank, and he worked with Mitt Romney. He and Mitt Romney were good friends in those days. And eventually, though, after not too many years, he did go back to Israel and start a political, didn't start off being a political career. He worked at first in the private sector. He started an anti-terrorism, not-for-profit organization in memory of his brother, Jonathan Netanyahu. So, sidebar. Anybody remember the story of Jonathan Netanyahu? He was killed, and he was the only Israeli soldier killed. He was killed, and 3 of the hostages were killed in Entebbe. But I'm sure many of you have seen that movie, The Raid on Entebbe. Very powerful, and this was a very daring operation in which Israel sent covert operatives to go rescue their hostages being held on the ground in Idi Amin's Uganda. By the Palestinian Front, they were called. So they were kind of a very radical wing of even more radical wing of the PLO. The Palestinian Front was radical. So when Jonathan Netanyahu was killed, that was a huge Israeli national tragedy. That whole a whole incident of Entebbe and the plane being hijacked and Jews, being held hostage, and then the really courageous rescue of them. Netanyahu became a heroic figure in the Israeli public, and Benjamin, his brother, came back. By the way, Yonatan was his younger brother. Came back and started a foundation against terrorism, a think tank, a study organization to combat terrorism. So he's working in that, and as he's working in that, he eventually gets sucked into the workings of the Israeli government. First, he's invited to come and be part of the Likud party slate, and in that, and I'm going to explain to you about Israeli elections in a little bit, but in that capacity, he becomes a member of Knesset, which is it's the parliament in Israel, so it's, like Congress or the Senate, and becoming a lawmaker, and then he was appointed to a ministry, and then he was appointed to be a deputy ambassador to Israel's embassy in Washington, D.C., and then he was made the ambassador to the UN, and then he was made the foreign minister, and throughout his career, once he got into politics and government, he really held he held 9 different ministerial offices in the Israeli government. So, quite experienced in government. But, do people like him or not? But, you could say, let's have a conversation. It's mixed reviews. Why? Why is it mixed reviews?
Well, one thing that I think of is that the public doesn't feel he addresses social issues in the country. He's very involved with international issues, like people feel the housing is inadequate and food prices were high, so they feel angry at him for not dealing with their issues.
The social issues, that is one element, yes, but some people feel, others. Before we go on, I should say, one of the things he's famous for, and people are dissatisfied sometimes with his domestic policy, but one of the things, major influences that he had on Israel was changing Israeli economics. He had this background from studying here in the United States. He single-handedly, as Israel's finance minister and in his positions in the ministry, kind of shifted Israel away from a more socialist-based governmental operation to a free market economy. So that meant that previously the government ran all the public works. Those were privatized. The government ran El Al Airlines. That became privatized, as well as the Egged Bus Company. It had, been a government public bus company. That became privatized. He changed the laws. He had the laws and regulations changed so that Israelis could have unlimited investment overseas, whereas before there were, restrictions on investment. He de-socialized the Israeli economy and made it into a free market, more capitalistic economy from the socialist one. And this was in a time this was in response to rampant inflation in Israel. I lived in Israel in 1986, 87, and I would go to the supermarket, and it was just my husband and I'd buy enough groceries for 2, and I would write a check for 163,750 shekels for, cornflakes and eggs and, a little bit of chopped meat. It was literally like that, and we had to spend our money. My husband got paid at the end of the month. He got a monthly paycheck. We had to spend our money up front. So because it was not worth as much by the end of the month as it was in the beginning of the month. And as a young couple, we really struggled. It's one of the reasons we came back from Israel, actually, because we couldn't make ends meet. We literally were selling pieces of our furniture to get through the month. My brother came to stay with me for one summer. He was 18, and he came to stay with us in our apartment in Jerusalem, and I had a second bedroom, and I had a bed in there and stuff. He went on a trip with some of his friends hiking in the north, and he came back, and I said, well, now you're on the pull-out sofa in the living room because we sold the bed. So it really was, those days were very tough. And so in response to that, and whether or not it's good or not, that could be a debate. Netanyahu was very, very influential and much responsible for changing the Israeli economy to a more free market capitalistic economy, which then causes the kinds of issues of inequality that we see cause domestic dissatisfaction today. And it is true that as a result, the income gap has widened greatly, and that there are people, their poverty in Israel is worse now than it used to be. And that also, I think, has to do maybe with the free market change over to free market economy also has to do with the fall of the kibbutz movement. If you recall, we talked about that in this class, and how the kibbutzim are not the same way for the most part, the way that they used to be. So Bibi Netanyahu is responsible for that. And about 3 years ago, there was a huge riot in the streets of Israel. Why?
Cottage cheese was
Cottage
too high.
cheese was too high. Cottage cheese is a staple of Israeli diets. People eat cottage cheese twice a day for breakfast and for dinner. It's always on the table, cottage cheese, cream cheese, yogurt, those kinds of things, breakfast and dinner. It's a staple, and the price just got so high. It was like that guy here in New York who the rent's too damn high party. It's like the rent is too damn high. The cottage cheese was too damn high, and people got mad about it. And eventually, it did force Tnuva, the Israel Collective, into changing and lowering prices. But Tnuva, which is a huge dairy collective, also used to be socialized. Now it's a privatized enterprise. So, listen. If you take from here and put to here, then that means here has, it's very hard to balance and to maintain. But Netanyahu is responsible for changing over Israel's economy to a free market economy. Now, I kind of got off track. So, what else about him do people like or not like?
He's very hawkish, right-wing. He was behind expanding settlements in the occupied territory.
Yes. That is probably primarily what people think of when they think of Bibi Netanyahu. He is very, what people call hawkish. That is, his main thing is security. Security, security, security. He does not believe in giving away something for nothing, even though he did do that in the case of Gaza. He ended up giving away something for nothing, but he finds that that's a big mistake.
I thought he was against that.
But it happened while he was part of the government. It was, it was Sharon, but Bibi was minister at the time. He's against it, but in the end, they voted to do it.
And
But
he was right?
maybe, yeah, who knows? It's crazy there. But he will not budge an inch when it comes to Israeli security. And this makes him very unpopular in certain factions, and yet, at the same time, very, he instills a sense of confidence with other people because they feel, Israelis feel, he's not going to, he's not going to budge an inch that would, in any way that would endanger Israel. So, people find him to be hawkish, very outspoken about it, rash, unreasonable. He sometimes is portrayed as bending the truth a little because he says we're not going to expand settlements, and then he gives approval for growth in settlements. But to understand that, you also have to understand the way Israeli settlements are in the West Bank or in Judea and Samaria. There are quote-unquote settlements which are so close to Jerusalem that it's like going from here to the other side of Staten Island. I mean, it's just, they're so close to Jerusalem that they become part of Jerusalem, and people feel like this is just a suburb of Jerusalem. It's not a settlement. It's a suburb of Jerusalem, and those communities are not going to be given back in any land swap deals in any two-state solution, because thousands of people live there. It's very established, and they're not going to give them back. Now, then there are settlements that are way out, that are farther out from the urban areas, and they're small and not as populated, and those settlements maybe would be up for negotiation. Maybe, I don't know. Thank God I'm not involved in those politics. But those places far out there generally are not where building permits are granted. Generally, the building permits are granted in the places that are close in, at which Israel never has any intention of giving as part of a Palestinian state. So, but he does fall under criticism for that. And last year, when Kerry was there, and Kerry was trying so hard in the peace process, and in the middle of it, they announced that they're going to, they approved 700 new buildings. It seemed provocative, and in a way, it is provocative. Let's be honest. And that's part of Bibi Netanyahu's style. His style is, I'm for the Jewish state, and basically the rest of you can, either take a hike, we're gonna do what's good for us because we know that the rest of the world isn't gonna do what's good for us. That's true. So we have to be the ones who do what's good for us. It's, to a degree, it's true, but at the same time, it's not really very diplomatic. Diplomacy requires a little bit from, here, talk to here, listen to here, compromise here. So the argument is that Israelis have done that so much already.
Diplomacy only works when you have two reasonable people sitting across from each other.
Yeah, right. You have
That's
to be.
why there's no diplomacy.
Well, I heard. Last fall, I went to a lecture. I heard speakers. Two gentlemen who had been part of the negotiation process, a Palestinian and a Jewish negotiator who had been part of the process. And what both of them said, and they were sitting at a table together in a panel discussion, both of them reasonable people who I think truly in their hearts would have liked to see a solution, a resolution come to. And what each one of them said, the reason why it didn't happen is because of a refusal to even give an inch as to the other's narrative. So the Palestinian narrative is this has been, this land was my ancestral home. I have a farm here. My family has lived here for hundreds of years. All of a sudden, the Jews come in 1893 and, ruin everything. You have no place here.
Did they
The
ruin
Jews,
everything in 19?
well, I'm just saying, I'm giving you a hypothetical example, okay? The Jews say, this land is my ancestral homeland. It's the homeland of my people. It's where my roots are. For the last 2,000 years, I've been waiting to get back here. And when I came here, I came here illegally and got this land from the British Mandate, or I bought it through, the Jewish National Fund, or I paid for it myself and bought, or, and it is true, there was a war, and sorry, you lost. I won, you lost. That's the way it is when there's a war. Deal with it. So, listen, you can't ever come to any solution in any argument unless you're willing to hear and acknowledge a little bit of the other person's story, of the other person's narrative. Put yourself in their shoes and say, okay, I'm willing to compromise. And that's what has to happen, in my opinion.
No, I was in favor of a two-state solution for a long time, except now I'm not. And the reason I'm not is, I don't know who we're negotiating with, because the other side is so unstable in that region. And for the first time in my lifetime, and I'm not a big Netanyahu fan, but he does, he is strong. But for the first time, I think Israel's gonna have to be in a state of readiness for the rest of their existence.
Well, I think a lot of people are coming to that because this is going on so long with so intractable, and it's getting worse at this time, with such intractable positions. So Bibi Netanyahu stands on the ground of, I'm gonna do what's good for the Jews and for the Jewish state, and that's gotta be my first priority.
Yes, Bibi Netanyahu also said, how do you negotiate with those that are sworn to your destruction?
Right, he did say that, and he means it. He did put forth, how do you? He did put forth a peace plan, a two-state solution. In it, his requirements were that the Palestinian state be demilitarized, that is, that they have no army and no weapons aside from a civil police force, and that he had some other security issues around the Palestinian state that had to do with security, and those things don't fly with the Palestinians. So it's a headlock. There's I don't know the solution. I do know, I think about it every day, and I'm very pained by it, and it's probably, I get too worried about it. Anyway, last week, Bibi was here, and it was a big brouhaha.
Yeah.
So I'll pass these out. This is a transcript of Netanyahu's speech before Congress last week. Did you have something to? They're coming around. So here in this country and in Israel, there was a big, as I said, a big uproar about Netanyahu coming to speak at Congress. What was the issue?
He was not invited by the president, he was invited by the opposition to the president, and that's diplomatically, you don't do that.
He was not invited by the president, but he was invited by the opposition. He was invited by the Republican speaker.
He was also close to the Israeli election, and they felt it was a political move on his part rather than just for security.
Both of those things. So Israel has its elections next week on March 17th. And St. Patrick's Day. I don't think they care about that in Israel.
He also said no deal is better than a bad deal. I think that's what he was talking
So
about.
he came, and Netanyahu, first of all, said he was not coming because of politics and the election. Who knows if that's true or not? It is, the timing is, okay, has to do with Israeli elections are next week, but at the same time, the Obama administration has been working on brokering a deal with Iran, and Israel is very, very concerned that if Iran were to have nuclear weapon capability, it would mean World War III and very serious repercussions for the world. Israel maintains that Iran is behind a lot of the of unrest in the Islamic world, not with ISIL though, because they're actually enemies of each other, but nonetheless, Iran has funding and it has, the capability. If Iran can make nuclear weapons, Israel is very afraid that will be disastrous for Israel and for the world.
Okay. I have heard this thought, that,
He never
I
speaks
don't
loud.
think Israel is worried
You have to
about,
speak up a little.
I know, I can't, I apologize. I don't think Israel is worried so much about Iran, like trying to destroy them, because if Iran were to do anything to Israel would retaliate, then you have no country, either one. Right? They're not stupid, but if they get the nuclear capability, they will be distributing it to some of the crazies, and that could be a really serious problem. By crazy, they mean it could fall into the hands of ISIS and other Al-Qaeda
Well,
groups.
ISIS and Iran are enemies because they're two different kinds of Islam. And Iran, according to the thinking of many people in the diplomatic corps and the UN, believe that Iran is after a position of supremacy in the Middle East, and is very aggressive about it. Since the Shah of Iran was overturned and it's been an Islamic government there, it's progressively regressed its society.
Right now, Israel is in a position of superiority as far as arms and nuclear weapons, right or not?
Yes.
So if Iran wants to do that, they're not asking for, not that I'm for Iran, so don't get me, I don't want the whole world to fall on me. Iran wants to be like equivalent to Israel, and what you just said about, if they do, I mean, they wanna be superior to all the other Arab, Muslim states.
They want to be,
I'm
Iran
asking-
wants to be a world player. Iran wants to be on the world milieu as as one of the top, most powerful
I am
countries.
afraid of them,
Yeah,
but
everybody is.
I can see where they're coming from. Can't you? Or could you? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm putting
very
yourself
sure
in their shoes, which is which is what I just said.
Because
You
you
have
are
to try to
pretty
see.
objective, right?
Yes.
You seem to be pretty objective, and that's hard for a woman that's head of Hillel, that lived in Israel, that's a Jew. I mean, and I feel the same way, and I have friends who are Israeli, and they wanna kill all these, jihadist things, and, but I'm not saying I want them to be a nuclear power, I don't, but I can see where they're coming from. Like
Well-
any other state in the world, everybody would like to be a player, no or
But
yes?
they wanna kill.
Yes, but what the world is afraid of is that right now the countries that have nuclear power ostensibly, and I say that with a big, all capital letters, are world powers that are stable, that have governments that are stable, but it's not really the case. It's a scary, if you allow yourself to lay there in bed at night and think, oh, Iran might have the bomb, North Korea might have the bomb, China has the bomb, Russia has the, you could never sleep, you'd be sick. And they might be thinking, oh, the United States has the bomb, I don't know. Whatever, Netanyahu does not believe that the Obama administration's strategy and tactics in dealing with Iran is the correct one. And he came to Washington, stood before Congress at the invitation of the opposition leadership, and made this speech in Congress. So if you have time, you should read it. It's an excellent speech. It's a wonderful speech. And it's an impassioned speech. And I think he tries to speak in very plain language about what he sees as the threat.
Yes, you cannot allow Iran to develop the nuclear weapon, because once they have it, it is not a question of development, it is a question of quantity.
Right. And he's afraid of, that Iran is a genocidal state. And
Amy, Posner,
You can call me Miss Posner, that's
Grain,
fine.
Grain Green, is there such a man as Grain Green?
He's
The
a
author.
writer.
Yeah.
Does he write for the Atlantic?
I believe so.
Okay, somebody
But I don't
sent
think
me.
he's around
Merle,
anymore.
Sent me, someone from the Atlantic sent me email about ISIS. It's so complete, it comes from the Atlantic and explains all about the relations between the different factions within all the different, Arab, Muslim,
I'd love to see that, if you could send it to me, I would appreciate it.
I will try to print it out
Okay.
and print it for you. And maybe I can make copies for everybody in the class, because it explains everything of what's going on there.
That would be good, send it, if you can email it to me, I will try and make copies for everyone. Okay.
Did he ever have dual citizenship?
He does not have dual citizenship, he's an Israeli.
I think that what we're talking about really is that the countries that have the bomb are countries that are using it as a deterrent
Yes.
and not threatening anybody with it and not saying they're gonna use it, except if someone uses it
Good
first.
point.
But
Iran
Iran
says
is a country that says we want it so that we can obliterate Israel.
Israel. And that's, Iran has, and that's exactly the sharp point. The bomb is used as a deterrent by most countries, but Iran has said that when they get it, they will use it to obliterate Israel. They've said it more than once and many times.
In all fairness, although I don't know when Cuba from Russia had missiles pointed at the United States did not lie down and say, okay, point them at us and shoot them.
That's
There was
because
almost a
Obama
war.
wasn't president.
Well, right, that's another element of this, is that very often, when it comes to Israel, the world has a bit of a double standard, as we saw, I think, this past summer with Gaza and the Operation Protective Edge. If Canada or Mexico, God forbid, were shooting missiles into, the United States and targeting San Antonio, I think that the United States would respond in kind. I don't think they would just say, oh, those poor people over there in Gaza, they deserve, to have a second. I don't think so, and neither should we? So, but there is this double standard when it comes to Israel, as we all know. It's not fair. I don't know how to change it, but it's not fair.
In the history of the world, has there ever been a country that won a war and therefore won property, and the world said, instead of it being yours, the spoils of war, you're supposed to give it back? Not that I don't want a two-state solution, I do want peace, but in the whole history of the world, when there's a war and you win, the whatever you conquer is yours.
World War I. World War I says no more, none of that anymore.
When
Okay?
they had the League of Nations.
Well,
No, they didn't.
World War I, though, the Ottoman Empire was destroyed, and the British Empire was allowed to expand. So, listen, we all know there's this double standard when it comes to Israel. There's nothing, we could talk about that till the cows come home. All right, so, a little bit more about Bibi, just be a little more, on the other side of things, personal life. He's been married 3 times. He's been married 3 times. He is notorious womanizer. He has had many affairs. His current wife,
That's what makes him
Sarah,
a politician.
they've been married for over 20 years, and they have 2 sons together. But it is a well-known, not too secret that he has a long-term mistress. His first marriage ended in divorce because of his philandering.
But at the speech she gave her heart to him, she kept going like that
Well,
to him.
his wife now, Sarah, they've been married over 20 years, and
That's it.
I guess she's forgiven him, whatever, I don't know, I mean, the man's in his 70s. Listen, I'm just saying, I won't go into that too much, but he does have a history of personal history of a little bit of scandal and running around. And, he's on but his last wife, his third wife, they've been married for a long time, they have children together.
Nice looking.
She is, she herself comes from, you know, the people that are in Israeli government that are up there, Netanyahu, one of them, they come from families that were, you know, very elite families of the early days of Israel. Netanyahu's father was a very well-respected professor. His wife, his current wife Sarah, her father was a poet, a very famous poet. His first wife was a Weitzman, who was, Chaim Weitzman, first president of Israel. So, you know, they kind of run in those upper class circles, just like every other society.
Children with
He
his
has two-
first and second?
No, just with the, well, actually, that's not true. Forgive me, he has a daughter from one of the earlier marriages. I don't remember if it was the first or second marriage. He does have a daughter. And then he has two sons from one of his. So, colorful personality, bigger than life. He is also the only prime minister who has served 3 terms as prime minister. They were not consecutive. He had one term, was out of office, and then ran again, and has now run 2 consecutive terms. And he's going for a 4th. But he's the first one to have 3 terms as prime minister. So that brings me, and I gotta,
They compare him to Winston Churchill, that he's a great statesman.
he is, I think that in many ways he is a great statesman. As I told you, he held 9 different ministerial positions. He knows his way around government and diplomacy. He is right-wing, and his friends here in this country are Republicans. He aligns himself with the Republican Party in this country. He's a conservative. He's hawkish, but he does know how to speak, and I don't know if I wanted to show you this very funny clip. I said to them, how can you have a JCC and we can't show a 2-minute video clip?
Week after week after week.
You know what, the cable that's missing is $6 at Best Buy. I will give them the $6. Anyway,
Yeah, who is running against him?
okay, good.
And what is that position of that person? Is that
Perfect.
a popular person?
I couldn't ask for a better introduction because I want to spend the last quarter hour telling you about the Israeli elections and what's going on because
Is the funny clip that commercial about him being a babysitter?
yes.
Oh, I saw it.
Have people seen that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna tell about it.
Oh, it's great.
So, next week are the Israeli elections. I find Israeli politics and government to be pretty confusing.
Oh.
The first thing to remember is that we have a system of states, and we vote our representation by our state. So, as the state of New York chooses our government representation and sends them to the federal government to represent us, New Yorkers. Israel is a tiny country. It does not have states or provinces or, things like that. So the whole country of Israel is its electorate. In Israel, it's a parliament, it's not a Congress and a Senate. Although, like all democracies, democracy remains in balance by separation of powers. So there is an executive branch, there is a judicial branch, and there's a legislative branch. The legislative branch is the Knesset, and the judicial branch are the judges, the Supreme Courts and the judges, and the executive branch is the Prime Minister and the President's office.
Wait a second.
Also,
Is there a difference between the prime minister and the president?
yes,
Yes.
I was told that the president doesn't have much power.
It's ceremonial.
I'm gonna
This is-
tell you, that is
okay.
true, but I'm gonna tell you in a minute what he does. Also, municipal government run by mayors. They don't have governors because there's no states, but mayors of the different towns and cities also have a small part in the overall national government, because it's a small state, it's all one big thing. And the municipal governments have responsibility on very local levels, okay? The president and the prime minister are different. The president is voted upon by the Knesset, not by the people. The people are not casting votes for who should be president of Israel. The members of Knesset look at the leadership in the Knesset, and collectively they select the president. Very often it has to do with, somebody who is in the party with the most people. But the president's role is largely ceremonial. He's the one who attends affairs of state and the funerals of this person or that. He has two things that he does which are not ceremonial. And one of them is pardoning prisoners or criminals, or making pardons like that. And the other one is choosing the prime minister. So, how does that happen? When they have their elections next week, Israelis won't vote for Amy Posner, who's running for this party or that. They will vote for a party, a political party which has a very clear-cut platform of ideology. So rather than voting for a person, an individual, they are voting for a group, a party. And each party, according to how many people align with that party, are allotted a certain number of spaces on what they call a list. So it's a slate, basically, of that party. Okay? So that people are voting for their personal, their political, philosophical ideology to have a place in government, in lawmaking, in the legislative branch. So what happens? It's Israel. There's not two parties. There's not three parties. There's lots and lots of parties. Now, there's 120 seats in the Knesset. 120 seats in the Knesset. So you want your party to be the majority party, right? It's hard to get a majority party in because there's so many different parties. So then what has to happen is called coalition building. And the parties negotiate, jockey with each other to form coalitions. Like, okay, we believe in this and you believe in that, but we can work together and we'll support you if you support us, and they make a coalition. And then the coalition is kind of like, that's the majority group in the Knesset, and so when laws come before the Knesset, the majority group obviously holds the most sway because they're the majority. So how is the prime minister selected? The prime minister is selected. Usually it is the person who is the leader of the party which has gotten the most votes. All right, so if the party that's gotten the most votes, that all the parties have their party leadership, it's a leader of the party who has gotten the most votes. So the main parties right now in Israel, and that are really in, neck and neck in the election, are Netanyahu's party, which is called Likud. Likud is a to the right. They call it right center party. Okay, it's the hawkish party. I like that word, hawkish. That's why I keep looking at you. It's the hawkish party on security. It's the free market economy party. It's the party that Netanyahu is the leader of right now. The opposition is a party called Zionist United Party. This used to be what was known as the Labor Party.
Right.
For many years, the Labor Party was the dominant party in the Knesset. It's the more socialist line. It's more to the left, although it's still pretty center. It's not all the way to the left. The candidate for the Labor Party, well, Zionist Unity Party, is named Isaac Herzog. He is grandson of Chaim Herzog, who was a president of Israel at one point. And he is the leader of the Zionist Unity Party.
Isn't there a woman with him?
Next to, not with him, but there's another party that's very closely aligned to Zionist Unity, also a party that calls themselves centrist, named Tzipi Livni. Tzipi Livni, that party is called the Kadima Party, and Tzipi Livni is the head of the Kadima Party. So she and Chaim Herzog kind of have a partnership thing going. Tzipi Livni had been a minister in Netanyahu's party, but he fired her. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. He fired her, and he fired a couple of other people who had been in, working, ministers working for him, because they were too vocally opposed to his policies, which, stinks, but that's the way it is. So, it's Tzipi Livni and Isaac Herzog. He has a nickname called Bushi. I have no idea what that means, but that's Herzog's nickname. Bibi's nickname is Bibi. Benjamin Netanyahu is Bibi. And so what they're doing, and Tzipi is Tzipi, her name is Zipporah, yes. And then in addition, there are other smaller parties, but also influential. There are religious parties on the right. There's a women's party. And for the first time in Israeli governmental history, the Arab parties, because there are Israeli Arab citizens, Arabs who are citizens of Israel, the Arab parties have come together. There used to be many small ones, and for the first time in Israeli governmental history, they've joined together, which was very hard, God bless you, because they don't agree on a lot of things, and they have different philosophies, but they decided they're going to come together, and they actually have 13 seats, which is more than they've ever had before. So that could be a good thing, it could not be a good thing, I don't know.
Yeah. If you had to predict a winner right now, who would you think
I
it
really
is?
don't know. I was reading this.
Yeah, this morning they said it's 45% favor of Netanyahu and 45%
Yeah.
So it's either
Herzog.
those two, that's it?
Yeah,
you know?
they're pretty neck and neck with those two. And then what will happen is that it'll be up to the winner to form after the election, and whatever party has gained the most votes, the president, this is one of his non-ceremonial roles, will pick, will say, all right, you'll be the prime minister, you have a month to form a government. It's a little more than a month and a half to form a government. And during that time, the person who has been picked has to go around, get this party to make a coalition with that, to make a group, has to present a slate of proposed ministers, and ministers don't have to be members of Knesset, but very often they are, and come forward at the end of that time period with a proposal for a working government, which the president then can approve. So those are and other than that, the president is largely ceremonial, but those are three pretty major keys to power.
Who is the president now?
Reuven Rivlin. His name is Reuven Rivlin.
Is he kind of aligned with
He
either
is
side?
more aligned with Netanyahu than he's a more right-wing president than a left-wing. Okay? So there's many parties, they will try and join together. The Arab Party has said that no matter what, they won't form a coalition with anyone. They want to stand on their own.
When Obama sent people over there to undercut Bibi?
I don't
That's
know.
what they,
I haven't read that.
that's what the press was saying.
I know that the relationship between Obama and Netanyahu has been a rocky one. And,
Deteriorating.
in fact, I think that with this last week's speech in Congress, I think that Obama kind of,
Blew it.
well, I think he's kind of maybe feeling done with Netanyahu. I don't know.
Yeah.
I do know that Kerry and Netanyahu are close, and that they have a friendship in addition to working together, and they work together pretty well. And Kerry, I have to say, last year really tried like hell to get a peace deal. He really, really worked on it. In the end, it didn't work, but he really did try. So, just in closing, I had wanted to show you this really cute video that Benjamin Netanyahu has of, it's a political ad, but as I told you, his nickname is Bibi. So it's a cute political ad where there's a young couple, and the wife, they're getting ready to go out, and the wife says to the husband, I'm going to paraphrase it for you, the wife says to and those of you who've seen it, and if you didn't, go look it up, Google Bibi ad, okay? The wife says to the husband, honey, what time's the babysitter coming? We're going to be late already. And then there's a knock on the door, and the husband opens the door, and it's Benjamin Netanyahu at the door. And he says, oh my God, it's the head of the government, it's the prime minister, and he salutes him, you know, and he says, what are you doing here? And he said, well, you asked for a babysitter, I'm the babysitter. But then he goes to talk about how the Likud party really is the party that will protect the future, will protect your children. And that's the message of the ad, that with Likud, your children will be protected. Why would you trust it to the other two candidates? He gives a little smearing of the other two candidates. This one will sell your house while you're gone and all your furnishings. And this other one, she'll be over at the neighbors when you get back drinking coffee. She won't be paying attention. So it's a cute ad. Look it up, BB babysitting ad. And thank you, and I'll see you next week.
ממי, למתי הזמנת את הבייביסיטר? אנחנו מאחרים.
וואי, ראש הממשלה. איזה כבוד. מה אתה עושה פה?
הזמנתם בייביסיטר? קיבלתם ביביסיטר. איפה הילדים?
אבל אתה ראש הממשלה. אתה תשמור לנו על הילדים?
תראו, זה או אני, או ציפי ובוז'י.
לא. בוז'י, הילדים שלנו צריכים לשמור עליו.
עד שנחזור לא יהיה לנו בית.
הוא אפילו ימסור את השטיחים. וציפי?
ציפי, שעתיים במקום אחד.
עד שתחזרו, היא בטח כבר תעבור לשכנים. בבחירות הקרובות, אתם בוחרים מי ישמור על הילדים שלנו. בבחירות הקרובות, מצביעים רק הליכוד. די, ציפי.
שלום.
לא בכל תנאי.